So Adam Lobel, PhD, is a practitioner scholar of philosophy and religion and served as a longtime teacher, acharya in the Shambhala tradition. So that's the kind of baseline. He has been such a good friend and mentor to so many of us in Boston over the years when he lived here and since then. And I'm guessing all over our mandala, evidenced by the gathering tonight. He has a long, varied, and rich resume of experience, particularly around ecology and spirituality. But when reading over his bio, it seemed to me that the salient point was he remains attuned to an awakened, just terrestrial society. So he also happens to live in Pittsburgh in Allegheny County, which I think is kind of ground zero for where we are right now. And I can actually think of no one else I would rather hear from tonight than Adam. So welcome, Adam. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Max. It's very good to be here this evening. I gave a talk here in this context of the Friday evenings in Boston a couple of weeks or months ago, something like that. And I felt very different about giving that talk. Tonight, I actually feel a lot of appreciation for just being in a space together where we could feel and honor and reflect on the intensity of these times and what we're all holding. And so I'm thankful that I've been asked to be part of an inquiry with you together tonight, because we are indeed living in interesting times. And I want to start tonight by speaking directly to those emotions and longings and intensities that are alive in you, that are feel like a wound, that feel like a numbness or an outrage or a fear or an uncertainty or a paralysis or a feeling of despair or disappointment. I want to speak directly to your heart and your mind and your psyche in a way that I think we all share. We've been holding so much over this last few weeks, if not a few years. And we each hold the emotional intensity and the knowledge of what is happening in our world in different ways. And I want to begin tonight by really welcoming and inviting whatever it is that's happening for you. For some of us, we are in the midst of great despair about the future of our civilization on planet Earth. For some of us, we're kind of excited, almost turned on by all this intensity and drama. For some of us, we're activated and we want to engage and get involved. For others, there's a feeling of just kind of overwhelm and closing down, and at this point, kind of like, I can't stand it anymore, too much. And for others, there's a sense of almost withdrawing into spirituality, meditative practices, or meditative view that somehow allows us to maybe escape or distance ourselves from the intensity. So I don't know what it is that you're feeling, And so I want to actually invite you from the very beginning to give a little voice. We're going to be talking about voice and agency to some degree tonight. And from the beginning, I want to invite you to just check in with yourself just briefly. We're going to do some deeper inquiry later, but just quickly, just maybe close your eyes or not, and just see if you can hone in on what is one significant emotion or energy that you've been feeling over the last few days. And this could be a mixture of things. We don't have to get this right. It doesn't have to be exhaustive of the complexity of our experience, but just kind of what's one major emotion that you've been feeling? And we know that there's many emotions, but what's one that really stands out for you? And see if you can find a word or a phrase or even a poetic image that somehow expresses what you've been feeling over the last day or so, or few days. And this is just a kind of first pass, and we'll go deeper later. But for now, if you've found a word or a phrase, what I want to ask you to do is go into the little box where you see your face and your name on Zoom. And if you scroll your arrow over your little box, in the top right corner or somewhere like that, there should be three little dots, three white dots in a blue box. Everyone see that? Now, if you click on those three white dots and you go down, you should have an opportunity to change your name. Does everyone see that? So go to that spot and change your name, where instead of saying Bob or Sue or Adam or Mary, write in the emotion or phrase that you just came up with. And if there's two of you, like a couple in your box, you have to find the perfect union of your two emotions, or maybe write both of them with a slash between them. All right, so everybody change your name to this emotion that you've been holding. Is this not working? Oh no, it's working, good. Good, I see some disgust and impermanence and anxiety and roller coasters and sad longings and sadness and fear. So why don't you just take some time as people figure out how to type their emotion in, and just scroll through your colleagues and friends here and just look at some of the energies that we've all been holding. I can read some afraid for friends, curiosity, anticipation and dread, discombobulated, awfully excited, intensity, lethargic and foggy, exasperation, restless, anxiety and fatigue, worried, grief and resolve, ungrounded, grief and heartbreak, dread, schizophrenic, impatient, numb, longing, sadness, anxiously waiting, anxiety tinged with hope, determination, disgust, a roller coaster, more anxiety, sadness, anxiety, tired, hope, outrage, born of something that I can't see, raw, powerless anticipation, sad longing, fear, disgust, hopeless, disbelief. So, yeah, thank you for giving voice to some of this. And if you would like to keep your heartbroken, suspended judgment, uninvited anxiety, disappointment, and worry up, you can leave that, and that can be your identity for the next bit of time. If you choose to change it, you can. You can play with it as the evening goes along. This is one way to discover political agency in Zoom, that there are things that seem static and solid, but that are actually flexible, and there's lots of room for tactics, always. So tonight I'm going to really make one basic point, which is that all of this intensity, this anxiety and uncertainty and fear and rage and numbness, this outrage, this mourning and loss, this disappointment, this grief, is packed full of information. It is just bursting with knowledge, with wisdom, with love, with good-heartedness, and that all of this emotion and intensity that we're holding, even if that's numbness or paralysis, is actually the sign of our good-heartedness, our full-heartedness showing up in the world. And that's the main point I want to make tonight. For me, there's a kind of endless question here, which is, how do I live fully in this world with a full heart and really live beautifully and powerfully in the midst of this unbelievable crisis, multiple entangled crises that we face on planet Earth? How do we show up fully? What does that mean, and what does it look like? And I trust that in some way we share that question together. And if we think that this few days and this presidential election in the United States is a particularly big deal, if we think that this is a sign of tremendous uncertainty, something disastrous, I have to say that this is just the beginning. I mean, it's not even the beginning. We're midstream in a process of massive transformation of our civilization and of our world. So if you are hopefully awaiting a kind of an announcement on the news tonight that will bring all of this anxiety and uncertainty to rest, I can promise you that will be a temporary Band-Aid. And that the entire drama of this election is actually just really a surface symptom of a massive, massive complexity of causes and conditions that we're just beginning to face. So, if that's not inspiring, let's at least find some good ground to enter into our inquiry together tonight with some practice. My guess is that many of you are coming off of a full day of work and maybe Zoom, maybe constantly checking the news and New York Times and CNN or Breitbart, whatever your thing is, to find out what is going on in the US presidential election. Oh, by the way, one little caveat I want to say from the beginning here. This is a kind of United States-centric theme. We think those of us in the United States, maybe some of you in Canada, we think that this is a really important and big deal, and it is. The world is watching us. But other things are happening in other parts of the world that are equally important. And I just want to name this as a bias that I'm going to take a kind of American-centric, United States-centric approach, and that shouldn't always be how we approach things. It's very limited, but I just want to note that I'm going to focus on the US presidential election tonight because we think that's the kind of most important thing happening in the world. But there are lots of other political and ethical phenomena that are arising right now that we don't even sometimes acknowledge or notice in the US. So I just want to make that caveat. Having said that, let's see if we can help support our hearts, our nervous systems, our body to engage this inquiry this evening in a way that feels healthy and genuine, and rely on a meditation practice that can help form a good space, a context, a clearing, an environment for us to actually see and look deeper into what's happening systematically in our world and in our own hearts and our own being. And I want to offer a little bit of extra support this evening for our meditation. I'm just going to play some music to get us started. And the first part of the practice tonight, I want to invite you to just close your eyes, enjoy the music, and then I'll guide us a little more into some mindfulness and awareness, silence and stillness practice. So close your eyes and sit back, and I'm going to share some music. So as the music fades, we can let our awareness move into the silence. And protecting a space of silence and stillness amidst the chaos and intensities of our world and our lived experience. If you'd like to leave your eyes closed and just attune to the flow of your breath, you can do so. If you'd prefer to open your eyes and allow your awareness to be more expansive, please feel free to do so. And we will just gather our being, synchronizing mind and body in the present for the next few minutes to help support and create a context for our inquiry. As we settle more and more into our practice, let's in particular allow a gentle and kind awareness that acknowledges and recognizes the potency of what we've been through over this last period and respects the responsivity of our own sensitive being. So let the space be tinged with a softness or a care for your heart and your nervous system and your being. And we can allow this field of kindness to also include others, everyone else who has expressed their emotions on this call, on this Zoom, and really extending out into a country that's in a place of crisis, polarization, out into the rest of the world, and even including the forests and oceans, the non-human people, the climate and the seasons, and just acknowledging that we're in the midst of tremendous uncertainty that extends in all directions, including everything in that kind open space. Okay, let's just take a couple of deep breaths. Just let yourself breathe. Really do it, especially those of you that think I'm a meditator, I don't need to take deep breaths. Take some deep breaths. Try it. Try it. It feels good. Okay. So I've mentioned this word inquiry a few times, and I want to just say briefly what I mean by this word, and it's full of meaning. When I approach this this talk tonight, I think I face something, and many of you are Dharma teachers and meditation instructors or people who are in a healing profession and hold others and support others. So I think you'll resonate with this. You know, when I think about the talk tonight, I notice immediately that there's a part of me, you know, call it maybe like a healing energy or a healer part of me, that just I want to like just hold all of you and hold all of us and just say, you know, it's going to be okay. Let's tune in to our own wisdom, our own bravery, our own heart. We're going to get through this. Let's soften instead of staying hard and tense and tight. Let's relax back and back into the openness of awareness and compassion that we've all tasted in some way or another. And so I feel a certain almost responsibility that by the end of this evening, we all leave feeling at least a little better. And to be a little cynical about it, I almost think that's the transactional agreement between us. You know, that my job is to somehow help heal and we leave feeling better. And that's actually good. That's good. And there is a way that spirituality and psychological work and emotional work is healing and transformative and opens us up and maybe helps us deepen and expand our perspective beyond the limited framework of a frightened, defended ego structure, right? That most of us operate in, especially in the midst of stress and fear. And so our teachings, wisdom traditions help us soften and expand and maybe heal and open, and that's good. On the other hand, though, there's a way in which spirituality, modern yoga, mindfulness, Western Buddhism or modern Buddhism gets stuck in this very small box. that the only thing that wisdom traditions are supposed to do are to help reduce stress or bring healing or soothe our being. And of course, that's a very limited, energy. It's an important energy, but it's a very limited energy. It's a specific energy within a whole range of different qualities that any authentic contemplative tradition will evoke. A whole prism of colors that are part of a mysticism or a contemplative training. And this small box that spirituality is in, if it's focused entirely on soothing us, will leave a lot out. Will leave a lot out. Is the best thing for our world right now to have lots of people who are soothed? Is that really the extent of what a wisdom tradition offers? And in a way, this box that spirituality is currently in, it to me seems to actually get smaller in a lot of ways each year. And one of the things that's excluded from that box is what we normally think of as politics, the political. Right? So we've got something called politics, and what's that? Well, that's what goes on CNN or, on the various tweets or reports that are happening, that the political is somehow this world of chaos and challenge and injustice. And then that's totally separate from spirituality, because spirituality means settling into our heart, soothing, stabilizing, opening wisdom and compassion. And we often erect a firewall between the spiritual and the political. And I think what we're noticing right now, if we haven't noticed it yet, is that can't continue. We just simply cannot maintain this binary of the spiritual on the one side and the political on the other. Why? Because the political invades our psyche. The political, it ripples through our body, through our mind, through our heart. And we are political beings as humans. And by politics, I don't mean Democrat versus Republican. I don't mean running for office. And I don't mean necessarily like signing petitions or, posting on Facebook that you are for one side or another. I mean something much deeper. I mean an ethicality that is collective. That there's something in our political experience as humans that is deeply spiritual, that cannot be ignored. And so it's very limiting to think that spirituality is simply the soothing process or the preparation for action. And I'll mention this a little more later. For me, the word inquiry is a word that bridges the spiritual and the political. It's a word that coalesces or joins something meditative, contemplative, spiritual, religious, mystical, inner, psychological, on the one hand, with a kind of living curiosity that engages whatever it is that is arising in the field of our experience, such as an intensely polarized and heightened political field, such as a radically mutating and changing climate and ecosystem, such as eruptions of violence and fear and anger around white supremacy and racism. When these erupt in the social body, we call that politics. But of course, it really includes our little hearts, our minds, our state of being. And therefore, it's the content of spiritual or political or psychological reflection, contemplation. And this coalescing of the spiritual and the political, the inner and the outer, the personal and the collective, the emotional and the ecological, the human and the natural, this coalescing, this joining defines our times and our world right now. And so it's choiceless. We can no longer turn towards a mysticism or a spirituality that ignores the external world, the natural world, the political world. And at the same time, there is profundity in the wisdom traditions that is oriented towards what we think of as political and ecological. They're not separate. This is a made-up box. This is a new thing. It's just a way to organize Amazon bookstore. Like, which do you want to shop in? Do you want to shop in the political section or the spiritual section? These are just made-up categories, relatively recently invented, really over the last 40 or 50 years. And if you look deep into the texts and rituals and practices of the Buddhist tradition, you'll see that it's filled with an engagement with ethics, with politics. If you look especially within the East Asian Buddhist traditions, you'll see a profound ecological engagement. So another point I want to make tonight is that these binaries and separations are not serving us well anymore. And part of this longing that I think we all feel to live fully, to show up in the world right now means in one gesture, in one simultaneity, a spiritual and an ethical and political being. And just as an aside, this has always been my understanding of what Shambhala vision is. And I'm saying that because most of you are connected to Shambhala in some way. And what I'm seeing within the Shambhala community and the Shambhala world is an incredible splitting where the people interested in politics, social justice, ecology, issues around race have been completely alienated in many ways. And others who are really focused and devoted on Vajrayana practice, Tantra, the Guru principle, have like separated out from the scary, terrible social justice people. And there's this ridiculous division that does not serve the vastness of what Shambhala vision has always been about. And so that's the result of the crisis and trauma that we've experienced in our community. So I'm just naming this as these divisions are very real, where we recoil back into the spiritual to avoid the chaos of political life. And warriorship is, of course, that which brings forth the nature of mind in relationship to society. But we gave up on that. So I just want to remind us that we shouldn't give up on that. Inquiry is one way of being and one method that can help us explore whatever arises. And inquiry is a little different from meditation. I put in the title something like Inquiring into Political Anxiety. So if it's true that this emotion, this anxiety that we feel this despair and injustice and outrage and disappointment and frustration and sadness that we feel, if it's true that that holds a tremendous amount of information and knowledge, how do we open that up? How do we disclose and uncover in an experiential and direct way what that emotional complexity and intensity is trying to say? That's what inquiry is. And it's different from meditation in that meditation practices, whether it's shamatha or vipassana, whether it's peaceful abiding or awareness, are oriented, just in general, they're oriented towards the liberation or dissolving of emotion or phenomena. Inquiry, that's just a quick generalization. Inquiry actually wants to sink into and discover a thread of meaning and of information that is held within anxiety or fear, and not just rest with it or abide with it mindfully, nor just recognize its nature, but actually to draw upon it, to explore it, to get to know it, to listen deeply to what is arising in our experience. Not to quell it or calm it or heal it necessarily, but to let it speak. And so this is a practice, but it's also a way of being. It's a way of, it's a comportment in the world where we go through life in a living curiosity, where everything we meet, we want to actually eat it, digest it, and metabolize it. Massive explosion on the political scene, unbelievable uncertainty in our politics. Don't just withdraw into a meditative practice to find stillness, but open up and explore these emotions that we're holding that are so challenging and full of so much insight. And I want to offer a question here that's also a bit of a challenge to each of us. How many of us have done this, have lived with this kind of inquiry over the last few days? Be honest. How many of you have actually encountered what's happening in your being, what's happening on the news, what's happening in the world, and said, yes, yes, I want to understand the truth of this. I want to listen to this in my own being and in the collective politics. I mean, maybe you have. But that's what it is to be alive and vibrant and full-hearted in the midst of basically a collapsing civilization. And that bursts the box, that breaks out of this box that spirituality is currently situated in, which is just a kind of temporary soothing or stress reduction or way to feel better and healthier and more stable. And again, that's good. We want that. We need that. I just played a nice, beautiful cello song, and we meditated and we were silent. So I love all that. I'm not dissing it. It's good. It's important. It's beautiful. It's necessary. Let's not forget the silence and the heartfelt wisdom. And let's be brave enough to extend our sense of spirituality into an inquiry that could go into the political, into the cultural, into the ecosystemic. So let's try it. I think I've said enough about it. And I want to just guide us in an inquiry practice to help you explore and open up what you might be holding in your being, which we know is a lot. Okay? So we'll do a little practice again together. So just take a good relaxed posture and settle into your seat a bit more. It could be an especially relaxed seat, meditative seat. And our attitude here is open-ended curiosity, wanting to know, wanting to explore, wanting to sink into what our heart, our body is holding. Not to escape or suppress, but neither to necessarily overwhelm our system, but to find that balanced place where we can hold emotion and energies in our being without being overwhelmed and also without suppressing. This is very much a kind of tantric approach, actually. So closing your eyes, just let yourself again really settle into your body, into your seat. And maybe if that's too abrupt, at least welcome your awareness into the room that you're in. Welcome your awareness into the space that we're in together. Right now, all of that political intensity, the news, there's probably a little part of you that wants to open up the New York Times and just see if anything's developed. So don't do that. All of that is actually not in the immediate field of your experience. It will all be there waiting for you, don't worry. But for just this short period of time, you're welcoming your awareness into your body and really feel your head, your face, your shoulders, bringing awareness and mindfulness from your shoulders into the tips of your fingers, aware of both arms. And bringing awareness, mindfulness from your hips to your knees, and your knees to the tips of your toes. Aware of both legs and both arms, your head. And finding your seat on this earth, on Mother Earth, as she supports us. We're present, we're grounded, we're here. Finding your spot. And within this, just checking in, especially with your torso. But it could be really anywhere in your body. Exploring and feeling around. What are you holding in your being? Is there any feeling, felt sense, energy that you notice in your heart or your belly, your throat or your head? Is there some energy or feeling that is between you and feeling completely at ease or completely at peace? Is there something there that is a tension or an agitation or a hurt or a blockage? Is there something you're holding in your being? In your body that is maybe calling for your attention, that would like you to attend to it, that maybe has been calling out to you for days and saying, please listen, please notice this. Is there a hurt? And as you explore around with some open-ended curiosity, we're not looking to relax or fix anything. We're not trying to quell or resolve, but simply curious. What is my body and the wisdom of my body holding around the politics of our times? Now, if this is a new kind of practice for you, we're really feeling into an energetics or a felt sense in our body. It's not a thought or a storyline, but it can show up as a real feeling, maybe in our jaw or our throat or our belly. So choose one area of your body that feels like it's holding something and let your awareness move to this part of your being. And explore, ask, what is going on here? What is my body holding in relation to the politics of our times? And if this part of me is looking for something or is longing for something, what is it longing for? What is it asking for? What does it need? If this clenching in our belly or this tightness in our heart or this numbness in our being, if this could make a wish or ask for something, what would it ask for? What information is it offering if we listen? And as we inquire into what we're holding in our being, just receive whatever information or insight might be arising about what it is you're longing for. And just receive or welcome whatever comes. And for you, there might be nothing. This might be kind of fruitless. But for others, there might be some voice or some quality of experience that we're making room for and attuning to. And just notice what floats into your awareness as we listen to this felt sense in our body. What's beneath the anxiety, the disappointment, the rage? What are we really longing for? So as we receive or welcome whatever comes, if you are inspired to do so, I invite you to go to your chat at the bottom of your Zoom and just type in something that you're noticing for us all to see. And what's nice is that you have a totally like anonymous name because it's just an emotion for many of you. So it doesn't even have to be associated with you. So I'd love to hear a couple of people just typing in just something you're noticing that you're holding, or an insight that arose, or even just an expression of what is happening for you through this very short inquiry practice. And I'll read them aloud. So, a wish for everyone to have what they need, a wish for everyone to feel safe, noticing a longing for both space and direction, longing for kindness, a desire for patience, a longer view of our situation here on earth, validation. I long for clarity and kindness from all, longing for connection, noticing the need for friendliness of self and others. Furious rage turns into longing for connection. I wish for all beings to have unconditional love for all beings, longing for security and healing, longing for the innocence of childhood, a tightness in shoulders like holding a heavy burden, a longing for release, deep sadness, tears, longing for collective caring. Stillness is always here. Neurosis is on the surface. A longing for our community to heal and continue to be kind. Yeah, these are really, really beautiful. I want for many of us to learn how we can hear the sadness and suffering of others and be there in a way that can be heard. Wanting bravery to feel the depths of the sadness and powerlessness. Yeah. So now if someone wants to unmute and respond to this, and there might be more that come in and they're welcome. I'm just curious, what are you feeling as the energetic difference between these chat things that we're seeing in the chats, these responses from the inquiry, and some of the words or energies that you read or felt earlier? Longing to be able to make links and have more understanding, longing for the union of wisdom and compassion, wanting to find a way to digest what is so upsetting. Yeah, so what's the difference just energetically and just generalization between what we were first feeling, first the words earlier on, and then some of the qualities that are arising here? Any thoughts?
Hey, Adam, I'll get it started.
Yeah, please.
So the progression that I noticed in myself is that initially listened to my response at the surface level in terms of what's happening, all the things, disappointment and excitement or relief and all those things at different points in time. But after doing this inquiry, I'm more present to, well, if there is indeed a basic goodness in society, how can we unleash it or help it express itself?
Thank you. Yeah, so from the surface in the beginning to kind of the reactions to things in politics of this and that on a more surface level to more depth, and this very profound question of if there is basic goodness in society, how do we unleash that?
I don't know how to do it, how to get his attention.
Okay, so I hear a voice, maybe determination. Laura, is that you? Yeah,
Yeah,
please. Yeah, go ahead.
Liz, I feel very determined these days. I'm at a period in my life when most people are kind of starting to dissolve out of this life. But there's a great desire to meet this challenge. And I think it's all about being able to hear the people that are in such disharmony with those of us that are trying to move ahead. And there's a reason that they're suffering so much and so angry and so frightened that the country is becoming so divided. And it's so important for us to find out and be able to meet them in some way, be able to reach. You can't just talk to people. It's like, what do they need? What is it that really is going to make the difference, that we can be more united again? So that is my determination to find out what that is and to help it happen.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. So real determination coming out of not just inquiry, not just into your experience, but curious about others and people on the other side of the political spectrum and wanting to understand their suffering and their perspective. And, you know, my goodness, how rare is that? You know, that really deep curiosity, empathic curiosity to understand where is the suffering coming on the other side of the political spectrum. And that could go from blue to red, from red to blue on both sides, right? And maybe unity comes from that. Did you want to add more?
Go ahead.
If I may,
Oh, please.
I had an experience last Monday. We were playing music, and next door there was somebody with a leaf blower, and it was kind of like really filling up the space with that music. I play the trumpet, so I took that emotion, and I flipped it, and I started playing my trumpet, and it became blues. And then Laura chimed in, and she was with her violin, and my brother was with his guitar, and it became a dance. I mean, from emotions to direct experience of the feeling. And that's where my issue relative to creativity arises, in terms of stepping forward into the world and dancing and playing with whatever arises.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image. So taking emotion, you know, maybe first being frustrated with a leaf blower, and it's transmuted into a musical and creative expression of blues, and then it invites others to participate. And that's a beautiful little, you know, analogy for what so rarely happens personally and certainly on the political collective level. Yeah, that's a great little story. So I thank you. And I want to read just some of what others have wrote in the chat in response to my question about what is a shift that we notice between the initial emotions and then what arose out of the inquiry. And so there's sense of some sense of that we're sharing our humanity, that some of the responses in the chat or after the inquiry are more visionary, positive mostly, deeper, subtler, more nuanced terrains of the heart mind, and a longing to realize existential trust and vulnerability and reflect it to others. So those kinds of words don't happen so often on CNN or in our political organizing. And they could. There's no reason why that isn't shared. So I want to pick up on some of this as our time moves on for tonight, and take up this theme of surface versus depth. So this the anxiety, the uncertainty, the paranoia, the outrage that we feel, the disbelief, the feeling of total instability that is so often happening, that is full of information. And inquiry is a practice to attune to that and listen to it and really discover what are we really holding individually and collectively as a society, as a nation, as a global civilization. And there is a way in which most of our mental activity throughout the day is just taking place in the level of thoughts in our heads, reactions, habitual patterns, expectations, hopes, fears, fantasies, desires, ideals, dogmas, thought. And as meditators, we know that world well. And yet, in terms of political engagement, we tend to approach it almost entirely from that world. I like this, I don't like that. I have this judgment, I have that judgment. This is what's really happening, this is what's not really happening. And you can feel energetically how painful it is to be trapped almost entirely in that realm. And meanwhile, there's this depth happening in our actual body, in the wisdom and materiality even of our body and our nervous system that is full of hurt, of pain, of love, of longing. And we tend to ignore that as we go through political challenges. And yet the surface quality is not true only for the personal or individual or spiritual level, but this is what's happening, I think, in large part in our political spectrum. Something really wonderful that Charles Eisenstein said the other day, he had a great analogy, which is that our current moment of politics is a bit like, in the United States at least, is a bit like we're all in a prison. We're all in prison, a really terrible prison. And, it has some good parts and some bad parts, but we're in a prison. And one day the prison warden comes and announces to all of us, the prisoners, and says, guess what? We're going to be democratic. We're going to have a democracy. And the way the democracy works is everybody gets to vote on the prison mascot. Who do you want to be your mascot for the prison? Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And you get to choose. Isn't that wonderful? We're free. It's a democracy. You have agency and voice. Go ahead. And everybody votes. And of course, the prison is completely split right down the middle. We really know that Trump is definitely the mascot for us. He represents everything we love in the world. We want him. Joe Biden, we really want him. At least he's not Trump. And we definitely, he's our guy. And we all vote, and there's a big battle, and we're not really sure, who's going to win. And then there's a recount, and then the local warden's council gets involved, and they figure out who really won. And finally, one of them is shown to be the winner, and we all celebrate who liked that person. Half of us celebrate, yay, our prison mascot is the guy we like. And then the other half is angry at us, and they feel hurt and wounded, and nobody likes them. And it could go either way. And that's what we think of as politics. And what I love about this analogy is it just shows just the incredibly shrunken, broken quality of our politics and our democratic involvement at this point, as if all we can do in our supposed democracy is to vote for one white guy over another white guy to be our mascot of a system that seems to barely be changing in the fundamental ways it needs to change. So there's a way in which there's something on the surface of our experience that we keep getting stuck in that layer. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not saying that it doesn't matter who wins this election. It really matters. And I have a very clear opinion of who I think I want to win. There are significant implications of this election. So I'm not denying that. But there is a way in which we are collectively caught in a political engine that stays on such a surface level without sinking in to asking, what are the underlying causes and conditions that have led to a situation where no matter what happens, half the country is going to be angry, devastated, and blocked? That no matter what happens, the only or one of the only outlets of our political agency is to cast one ballot for a few people every 2 years or every 4 years. You know, going all the way back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Rousseau said very clearly, you cannot have a representative democracy. As soon as there are representatives representing your voice, something has been lost. And here we go, and we've extended it to such an extreme at this point where our political mechanisms are actually so unable to address these underlying causes and conditions, just like responding to the world entirely from our head and our thoughts misses the depth and vastness of our own heart, our own body, our own belly, our own being. So there's a parallel or a symmetry between our personal experience of just kind of slogging through politics mentally and conceptually and missing so much of our being, and then how that on a collective scale is happening where, you know, to get at this, a really good question here is, of all the things that were named as important in this election, what really was ignored? What was never even discussed in the debates or the online struggles? I mean, what do you really care about that was barely even named? You know, I mean, we each have different responses to that. What longings and fears are being held by almost every United States citizen? Fears about our future, loss of community, economic uncertainty, anger at the injustices, fear about climate and environmental destruction, a feeling of like a world that we were promised actually being lost. I had a conversation with someone yesterday that said something so sad and beautiful, a very, very smart person. And she said, in tears, actually, she said, I feel like I just realized that my parents lied to me. That the world that I was shown in the 70s and the 80s was a total lie. And there are a lot of people in this country, whether they're on the right or the left, who feel that. We're not sinking into the depths, personally or politically. What happens when we inquire into those depths and start looking at the causes and conditions that have led to a fraying democracy, to the incredible gridlock and polarization that we're in. This is where it becomes a real spiritual practice, that as we inquire into these immensely complex underlying causes and conditions, we will encounter the fact that we are all really held hostage by an economic logic that has just stopped functioning. And that our politics and our personal lives are really subservient to a set of rules for financial growth that are absolutely not serving our planet, our lives, our hearts, our families, our world. And no one can get out of it. No one can get out of this. And it's so sad and painful and entrapping. And on the spiritual journey, when we inquire and we feel into our heart, our mind, and reality, we encounter this immense uncertainty that we don't know how to walk into the darkness of non-conceptuality. And so similarly, as a civilization, we are being asked to let go of so many of the certainties, the dogmas, the stories that we have told ourselves, because they're no longer serving us. And that's where the work really begins. And people on the left of the spectrum in the United States, we need to recognize that millions and millions of more people voted for Trump on this election than in 2016. Despite everything that has happened over the last 4 years, millions and millions of people, more people of color, voted for Trump this time than in 2016. And so I very much appreciate what I'm hearing from some of you, that we really need to look deeper than some of the stories we're telling on the right or the left. And that takes a kind of political potency, a spiritual potency that unleashes our love, our longing, our bravery, our intelligence, that right now is almost completely squelched by the way our politics operate. So this is, again, going back to this box, this is why spiritual people, we need to engage in politics spiritually. And political people need to engage politics spiritually, or engage spirituality politically. And what I'm trying to say here, and this is my last point before we close, what I'm trying to say here is not that there is a happy merger or there's a balance point between the political and the spiritual. What I'm really gesturing towards is it's time to let go of those categories altogether. And that when we render inoperative the tension between head and heart, between surface and depth, between politics and spirituality, when we suspend that dialectic, it frees up the potency, the love, and the power of not just human beings, but of this whole living planet, of the animals, of the forests, of the oceans, of the dralas, we would say in Shambhala. And this is where what seems to be collapse, anxiety, and intractable blockages on a political scale is actually just a sign of the radical level, massive level of change that we're part of. And that is awesome. It is amazing what's happening on planet Earth right now. Don't get lost on the surface. This is what serious change looks like, right? So it's no longer that we live in an era of change. but actually we're living through the changing of eras, an epochal shift that we don't yet even have a name for. We don't know the name of the time we're living in. But in the future, they'll give this time a name. And whether you are old or young, on a mythic level, you have chosen to be born right now, in the midst of this. And all of the old rules and stories and logics are melting into thin air, and something very different is arising. And it doesn't look anything like blue and red states and Democrats and Republicans. It doesn't look like any of those things anymore. And so what is the political spirituality that attunes to what is actually emerging on this planet? And how do we serve that with love, with bravery, and with joy? Because these are really incredible times to be alive in our world. So there's so much more to say, but I want to pause with this. And I really want to, I spent so much time with the inquiry because I want to offer that to you. And I want to challenge you to live with that inquiry. Like, no matter what happens in the news tonight or tomorrow, whether you feel relief and excitement, whether you feel devastated, explore your heart, explore your guts, your bones, your being. Meet this moment in our world with inquiry. Eat it, chew it up, metabolize it, learn from everything, grow. That's warriorship. That's Tantra. That's being awake. And like I said earlier, if you think this week has been challenging and unstable for you, I mean, what happens when we no longer have the seasons to count on? What happens when, 64% of the arable land is no longer arable? What happens when the water is privatized? What happens when our cities on the coasts are flooded? What happens when there are no forests to go to anymore? What are the children like that are going to be born in the uninhabitable planet that we're creating? So if you think this has been rough, we're just getting ourselves ready. We're exercising the muscles. We're building the capacity to meet the reality of our world. So I think that's more than enough. Please take this inquiry practice into your life. It's simple. When you're feeling a lot, when it's too much, don't just sit, don't just eat Snickers and drink beer, but close your eyes, feel into your being, and without trying to suppress anything, really discover what's there. What am I holding? What am I longing for? And trust what arises. It's actually more magical than we usually allow for. So with a lot of love and appreciation for taking time to be here, may all of your political longings bear fruit, and may we live in a more beautiful world. So Mary or Max, anything to close?
Thank you. Thank you. Really helpful. Can we do this every Friday?
No.
Yeah, I really appreciated the putting into context the total loss of a habitable planet makes what we're going through now feel like no big deal, or it'll seem like no big deal when we look back on it. Who knows?
Right.
No, I really actually do feel like I have a lot to to sit with from this. So I appreciate. Glad I was here. I'm glad that we have so many people here, and I really hope that we can all bring the ripples of this into our weeks. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Adam, for sharing, and thank you, Mary, for making it happen.
Yeah, thank you to both of you, to Mary and Max, and to all of you. Much love, and this is our practice. This is our real practice. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you, Adam. Good night.
Thank you.
Adam, will you, I could send an email, but you're still here. Would you share the song and the Charles Eisenstein
Oh, yeah.
thing that you referenced?
The Charles, I heard him speak that on this thing that Ubiquity University did. I don't know if there's a way to access it. Charles often will repeat what he says in different talks and writings, so it might come up elsewhere. If I find it, I'll send the link. But it was an exchange he had with Vandana Shiva, Humanity Rising.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom. That was my mom. So yeah, that's right there. That's where it was. He had an exchange with Vandana Shiva, and he probably has said it elsewhere as well. And that's where he also, yeah, gave this metaphor of the prison.
And there was a request for the cello music.
Oh yeah, that's by Adam Hurst, and it's from an album called From Silence. Hurst.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of music, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I figured we needed all the help we could get tonight. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to see many of your beautiful faces that I don't see so much anymore. A lot of old friends here. Oh, good to see you.
Thank you all.
All right, good night. Much love.
Right.
Good night. Be well. Take care.